All right. So thank you for watching this far. And if you've made it this far in one piece and you're like, oh, I got this, then congratulate yourself. I mean, this is a lot of work for yourself, especially if you went through the intro and now you got to movies. Yeah, good job. So, all right, now let's go ahead and talk about what we need to do next. So we got the movie diagram, kind of built out, and it looks like plain HTML at this point. So for more of the seasoned people who have been doing, HTML for a long time, you might not be impressed. You might be thinking, well, I can do all this in HTML. Why do I have to write all of this with React? What is the point? Like up till now, you've just been doing HTML side JavaScript, and I get that. I understand. So let's talk about why using JavaScript is actually better than just writing HTML. So the first thing you got to remember about JavaScript is it is a programming language, whereas HTML and CSS are just more like for writing, basic pages. It's very manual, it's very tedious, especially the whole concept of putting together an HTML page. If you've done HTML pages in the past, it's a lot of work just to like build out like, a big, beautiful, I don't know, let's say if I went to, like Sony PlayStation.com, right? That's a nice site. Oh, spelled it wrong there, but let's go ahead and jump over to the right one. So yeah, if I wanted to build this page, oh man, like it would just be a lot of work, right? It's just like, where do I even begin, right? All the HTML. So let's go and view the page source and see what we got. We got a lot of code, a lot of code. And I think like the thing is when a lot of newbie developers kind of look at this, they think, how am I going to build all this, right? Like, well, how do I do this? Maybe I'll just write it out by hand. And you could do that, and it would take you all day. Maybe it would take you like several days. Maybe it would take you a couple weeks, right? The answer is that you would not write all this code out by hand, right? Unfortunately, this is just one page, and Sony has like tons and tons of pages. You can't code all of them by hand. So what do you do then? Well, you use a programming language like JavaScript instead to basically pull in data, right? Somebody else writes the data. And, all this stuff probably comes from like a copy editor, or, these images come from designers. You can think of images as also data. You can think of videos as also data. And in this modern world now, like a lot of people push content from other sites, other places, other dashboards, and that video has to get loaded into the web page, and the HTML has to kind of like be auto-created by some kind of script. And again, what is that script? JavaScript. So JavaScript is the script language that you can use to build HTML faster and easier, as along with CSS. So with all that said, let's get into the point of how does React do that for us better than regular JavaScript. Well, regular JavaScript, as you know, is kind of cumbersome to write. And so for a while, people were using things like jQuery to write HTML, JavaScript, all of that, like a little bit quicker. And jQuery has been like sort of the dominant, and is still sort of the dominant scripting language. It's still JavaScript, but it is sort of like JavaScript a little bit for dummies, right? Like for people who want to make it easier for themselves, myself included. I actually like jQuery. So, a lot of developers kind of like hate jQuery, and they think, well, why? I don't want to use jQuery. It's like a lot of weight. I mean, I get that too, but the framework, or it's not really a framework, the library is very useful, especially if you want to like go and kind of see, like how did they kind of create like simpler JavaScript where you can just write on click, do some function, and right, like show a box or hide a box. I'd agree nowadays with the new ES6 syntax in JavaScript, it's a lot easier to write, these kind of querying functions. In the past, it wasn't, and there was also a lot of problems with cross-browser support, so something like jQuery made a lot of sense for the time. But yeah, now given ES6, it is a little bit easier to write a lot of this stuff, so you may not need jQuery. But that said, jQuery itself is not enough. If you're going to start creating, HTML and, making AJAX calls to get data, from different places on the web, you're going to write a lot of jQuery, and eventually what's going to happen is you're going to have jQuery all over the place. And so again, it's going to become like a mountain of not HTML, but jQuery, right? And it looks like Sony actually has some jQuery in their site. So even they are kind of like, stuck using it. Again, jQuery is all over the web, and no big deal, right? jQuery is, useful. So if they wanted to use it, that's the decision they made. But that said, React kind of helps those people who use a lot of jQuery or a lot of JavaScript and make it a little bit easier to manage that JavaScript. So let's take a look at how that works. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we need some data to work with. So let's go ahead and create in our source folder a movies.js file. And this is going to be dummy data that we basically just put together to essentially just work with. So I'm going to copy this data that I got from my GitHub. Again, it's all on GitHub if you want to go and take a look over here. It's called movies.js. I'm going to move this to the side so we can focus on what we're doing. And I'm going to go to that movies.js file that we just created, and I'm going to paste it in here. So what is this? So I pasted in this movies.js file, and if you notice it has an array, and here the array is basically containing some JavaScript objects. And JavaScript objects are a great way to hold data because they have what's called properties, and each of these properties kind of helps us categorize data in a specific way. So here I have the OMDB ID, which is the Open Movie Database ID, and we're saying that this is the ID 1, and remember this is just fake data. Then here I have a title called Star Wars 1, Phantom Menace, and then I have a URL, which is a poster, and if I copy this, I can basically paste this in here and take a look at the poster. So I don't actually have to create a whole bunch of different variables, just a whole different things, right? Objects are really great because they can let us hold lots of different values in one place. Here I've got the year that it came out, 1999, and if you remember, we made the movie listing, and we want to put in, we want to remove this placeholder context, and we want to put in the JavaScript. We want to use JavaScript to basically pull in this data here and, replace whatever's here. And that's how you use the power of React to help you out, because React is JavaScript, and then it makes it easier to work with JavaScript in a way like jQuery does, so you can get your data dynamically quickly. So yeah, just going through the array here, I have more movies. I have the Star Wars 2, Star Wars 3, Star Wars 4, all the data for them all up to 9. And yes, I did see all 9 films, so very cool. Star Wars fan here? All right, so now that we got the data, we need to do something with it, right? So I'm going to introduce you to the idea of props in React. And props is just basically this concept where you pass in, just like a function, you pass in some parameters or arguments at the time of the function call. You can use that information that you pass into your function with your return statement and essentially spit it out here. So I'm going to create something called a prop, and that is the React parameter, and then we're going to pass in some data. So let's first go over to our movie listings.js, because we're going to import all the movies, and then we're going to play around with this variable. So import movies from .movies.js, and just confirm that it's in the source folder. Always make sure you're working in the source folder. Okay, so now I have the movies. So the first thing I want to do is just take a look and see, what the variable is. So I can actually just say console log. And if I inspect my web page over here, I can see that I've got my movies here, my Star Wars movies, my fake data. That's pretty cool. And then I've got some other stuff here, an error, but we'll come back to that later. That's not important right now. So here I have the movies, and now I want to do something with the movies, right? So let's go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to make a movie listing. And actually, before I get to that, I just want to do one more thing. So remember, movies is a array of objects. So because movie listing is an individual element, we don't want to just pass in all of the movies to our movie listing. We want to look at each individual listing and then pass it over to a movie listing component, which will render it out for us. This is the power of React. So let's go ahead and use the built-in method from JavaScript. So movies for each, and just see what's inside here. So the first thing we can do is the for each function. If you're not familiar, we'll go and take a look at it right now. Let's just pull it up here just for convenience. So I usually do JavaScript for each, and then I usually put MDN or W3 schools. Some people like that, but this is the reference if you ever kind of forget. So here's a basic example. So here's my array of strings at this time, and I say, okay, for each element in the array, I want to console log it. So let's do that ourselves here. I'm going to replace this with just element, and just like they do, I'm going to say console.log the element. All right, so coming back over here and taking a look one more time, I can see now, let's see here, instead of the array, which I have also, I can take this off, comment it out. I'll see that this updates with each unique element, and basically inside here I can get at each object. So basically at this point I can say, all right, cool, I have access to each element. Now what do I want to do? I want to pass this somewhere. So let's do that next. What do I want to do? I want to basically create, instead of using the for each method, I want to create a new array of listing items. So this is a little bit tricky for newcomers because they kind of get freaked out by the syntax. But if you understand the for each method, which loops over each item in an array, then you'll understand that there is also another method that is very similar called map. And oops, I just butchered it, map. And basically, let's see here, I'm going to do array map just so that it's a little bit more precise. So array.prototype.map. So when I go over here, I can see that it's taking an array, and then the mapped array essentially takes each individual item and then does something to the individual item. Here it's saying, okay, take the number 1, then multiply it by 2, then the number 4, then multiply it by 2, then 9 by 2, then 16 multiplied by 2, and essentially I'll get back a new array of items with 2, 8, 18, 32. That is exactly what I want to do too. I want to take each element from my movies fake JSON and turn them into a movie listing. So I'm going to get rid of this stuff down here, and we'll come back to it in a second. And instead, what I want to do is I want to create a new function here, and I'm going to save all of it as a variable called output. Okay, so this is a very common pattern in React. And here, because I'm following React convention, I also need to provide a number or a key. So I'll explain what that is in a second here. But I want to create HTML, right? And so I want to essentially return JSX. And here I'm going to say I want to return a movie listing. And now this is where we get into the prop stuff. And I want to say, all right, I want to have a movie listing, and I want the title, right, to be the element dot title, and then I wanted to have also the year, and I wanted to have the element dot year. Oops. And then finally, I also want to get the image. So I'll just make this simple and just say image element dot poster. And you'll see that Visual Studio Code kind of helps me out by giving me the stuff that I know that I'm pulling in from movies. So here I can basically say, all right, cool, I have a movie listing, And one more thing I have to do for React convention is provide a index for each movie listing I'm going to create. So at this point, it's kind of like help you kind of summarize what we're doing here. We're saying, hey, instead of hard coding some HTML down here, we want to take an array of data and map it so that we can return back HTML dynamically using JSX. And we're going to save that in a variable called output. So now let's take a look and see what our output looks like. So if I save this, you're going to see image title year, image title year, image title year. So what happened? We don't see our data. It's not there yet. And that's true because we need to go and edit this thing also, individual listings, right? Right now it's just looping through each individual listing from our movies, fake data, but it's not actually pulling in the props. The props is the information we're trying to send down. So let's do that. I am going to just pass in a variable here called props. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use ES6 syntax, and I'm just going to say, all right, I want to get from my movie listings the title, the year, and the image. So I'm going to put that here, title, year, and the image. And this is just basic JavaScript destructuring. So if you're not familiar with ES6 syntax, I do advise you to go and check JavaScript's guide to ES6. It's also a playlist on our YouTube channel, and you'll be brought up to speed on that. So here I'm just saying pull this off the props. And then here, what I want to do is I want to just replace that all here. So for an image, I actually need to display it as an image. So I'm going to use image syntax, and I'm going to pull in the image here. And then also for the title, I'm just going to use regular title variable. And remember, the brackets help me pull in JavaScript, so or show JavaScript in React. So here we go. Let's take a look and see what we get. Oh wow, there's our Star Wars movies. All right, so good to go. Again, I have a little bit of errors here, but you know, for the most part, I can clean that up later. Basically, the short and long is, you know, a lot of these errors you can kind of click on and they will basically tell you like what exactly you need to do, like an alt prop. You can fix that if you want. This is a dev server, so I'm not going to pay attention to it for today, but later on, like in a more detailed video, yes, I would definitely show you how to like fix a lot of these errors. But for now, as long as you can see the code on the left-hand side and your web app working just fine, you're good to go. All right. And if I do make an error where it breaks the app, I will show you how to fix it for sure. I'll see you in the next video.